Before we unravel the secrets hidden behind Seoul's glass towers, take a second to like and subscribe if you enjoy stories about complicated families, unexpected loves, and impossible choices. Let us know in the comments where in the world you're watching from, because this journey spans continents, cultures, and hearts. Now, let's open the first chapter. It began the moment Dr. Odise Okonkwo saw her own tired reflection split across the silver doors of the Zenith Innovations headquarters, the place where ambition devoured strangers and spat out legends. Outside, rush hour horns tangled with temple bells and summer cicadas, but in that marble foyer, all noise was devoured by silence. Odise was a woman unnoticed in most crowds, tall, with skin dark as a late harvest plum, braids clipped back in a surgeon's practical neatness, every bit of her radiating the precise calm of someone accustomed to emergencies. Still, here in the territory of Korean chaebols, her presence, the careful way she stood, the child's hand she gripped, the elegant English-Korean cadence of her speech, made her both invisible and impossible to ignore. But this is not the story everyone thinks. It is not only about an unwanted contract or an impossible demand. It is about the moment before a life detonates, about the last gasp of normal before a name is changed, a heart exposed, and destiny rewritten by one impossible request. At the start, Adise's world had boundaries as sharp as a scalpel. She flew through Seoul's neon-lit streets in practical anonymity, arrogance bouncing off her in endless corporate meetings. At 28, she was a junior doctor with a specialty in pediatric oncology who'd come to Korea for a research grant, seeking only a few years of meaningful work and a quiet place to raise her daughter, Ifeoma. Ife, with her big eyes and impatient questions, was the miracle no one planned, the heartbeat in Adise's every hesitant decision since those terrible months after London, a different continent away. But there are moments fragile, infinitely small, when the future leans in a breath too close. This one began with an email, polite and cryptic, delivered to Adise's inbox at 2:03 a.m. Subject: Private Consultation. Sender: King Ji-hun's office, Zenith Innovations. The body was 3 lines, a command more than an invitation. 10 a.m. Level 42. Do not bring anyone else. Confidential. She should have deleted it. Instead, by dawn, she had researched everything about the man behind the signature. 33, Forbes Asia's youngest CEO, a legend built on zero sleep and steel-eyed business wins, with a public image so polished. It reflected nothing of the man behind the logo. She told herself it was curiosity, not hope, that made her leave Ife, the neighbors, and hail a cab into the glass and stone zone where secrets had addresses. It was raining hard, and by the time she was ushered past reception by a stone-faced secretary, she was soaked to the skin, heels squelching against tile. Ji-hun's office was all winter, stainless steel, glass, and a view of the Han River she'd only seen from subway windows. He did not look up when she entered, but she felt his attention as palpably as the rainwater dripping from her coat. He was taller in person, posture sharpened by hunger and pride, with hands that might have once been gentle, but now moved with the impatience of power. Dr. Okonkwo, he said, voice clipped. There was no handshake. Thank you for coming. Odise knew better than to fill silences. She noted the faintest tremor in his right hand, the glimmer of exhaustion under perfect hair, the way his gaze locked on her, appraising, desperate, and deeply troubled. I won't waste your time, he began, sliding a folder across the table. My family expects an heir. My mother expects obedience. I expect results. He paused long enough for gravity to settle in. You are one of the best in your field. You are also outside family politics. I want you to carry a child for me. My child. The contract details are in there. Financial security, health coverage, access to any research you want. 1 year of your life. Name your price. The words were knives, too cold and precise to be an accident. For a moment, only the city breathed. Rain sheeted down glass, and somewhere below, her own reflection shimmered. Why me? Odise asked, voice steady, a doctor's voice, not a desperate woman's. Ji-hun's jaw flickered. Because you don't know my family. Because you would not betray me for a headline. And because he stopped, wrestling with something invisible. You once saved someone I love. My father. He would be dead if not for you. In the corridor outside, Odisei could just make out technicians speaking rapid Korean, the soft snap of security doors. She thought of Ifioma, asleep in their apartment, the rent due in 11 days, her immigration paperwork, always one phone call from crisis. The folder in front of her was heavy with legal language and secrets. So many zeros she could see future years spelled out in relief. She wanted to say no. Everything in her, the memory of English winters, the glare of surgical theater lights, the endless fight to be respected as both black and foreign, too visible yet unseen, screamed to walk away. But the offer was a kind of trap she'd seen before. Gilded, cold, impossible. A shadow flickered on Ji-hun's face as the silence pressed between them. You will have autonomy, he said softly, as if the word could fix everything. After the child is born, your life is yours. More freedom than most here get. She met his gaze, refusing to flinch. And the child will never want for anything except maybe freedom, perhaps. That's a kind of irony, isn't it? In that split second, Odisei made a decision, bone deep and irreversible. She would not let these men, this family, dictate her life in the shadows. If she accepted, it would be on her terms, with as many witnesses as possible. If she refused, she'd make sure no one like her was ever cornered like this again. A storm raged over the city as Odisei signed the contract. It is so easy to believe a story ends when the ink dries on a page. In truth, every contract is just a beginning, especially when what's at stake isn't only money, but the story of who you are and who you might become in a city that swallows women like her whole. What she didn't know, standing alone in that glass cage, was how much power a single choice held, or how many hearts, including her own, would be remade by what was only just beginning. The rain never truly left Seoul that season, each morning breaking through Adisei's window in veils of moisture that blurred the city's neon edge. Life inside Kong Ji-hun's world moved according to clocks she did not set and loyalties she did not understand. A household run less by people than by protocols, where her presence as a black foreign doctor contracted to bear the air was scrutinized by everyone except the one man who had drawn up the agreement. Ji-hun's mother, Mrs. Kang, wielded her authority like a lacquered blade, summoning Odisei for interrogations disguised as tea, testing her every word, always searching for faults that might justify unraveling the contract. Servants and staff, schooled in chaebol tradition, offered Odisei stiff politeness and tight smiles, making it clear that she was not, and could never be, family. Even her daughter, Ifioma, despite her adaptability, shrank into herself in hallways, othered by classmates and scolded for braiding her hair in ways that did not conform. Yet inside the sterile calm of Ji-hun's mansion, something unexpected began to thaw. The CEO watched Odisei from a distance, his gaze lingering in doorways or at the head of vast, silent dinners, as if searching for the person she hid beneath her guarded excellence. Their evenings sometimes tangled when he pressed her about her research or her life in England, and she shot back, unafraid to laugh at his seriousness or interrupt his brooding with unvarnished questions. She did not need him to explain his family, his company, or his scars, but with each brittle encounter, she learned to see beyond the gold-edged contract. She discovered Ji-hun's penchant for late-night jazz piano echoing from down the stairs, his quiet fury when Ifioma cried herself to sleep after yet another playground slight, and even his occasional, clumsy attempts to intervene. Buying Aoife new art supplies or calling in favors for her school lunch table, gestures that felt more like apologies than solutions. Some nights Ji-hun brought Odisei tea himself, lapsing into stories of his boyhood, hours spent hidden from his mother's ambitions, summers in London where, for a season, he thought he might become someone else, a poet or a pianist, free of legacy. For the first time, Adisei's defenses frayed. She found herself speaking of her own migration, her mother's proverbs, her medical failures and triumphs, the horizonless loneliness of moving from one liminal place to the next. In Ji-hun's confessions, she sensed the difference between power and freedom, the cost of legacy when measured in nights spent alone, the echo of choices made for others' pride. Yet as spring slipped into summer, the family's hostility grew sharper. Lawyers appeared, whispering about her fitness as a mother, the legitimacy of her contract, even her immigration status, threats that hung like swords over breakfast. Mrs. King escalated from veiled insults to overt sabotage, attempting to bribe or intimidate Odysse into relinquishing rights to the child she now carried. The air grew poisonous, and Ji-hun, torn between his lineage and his gathering promise to protect Odysse, began to falter. He grew haunted, walking the halls at night, missing meetings, snapping at all but Odysse and Ife. One morning, as monsoon rains battered the city, Mrs. Kong confronted Odysse in the main sitting room, her words a venomous mixture of warning and plea. Leave now, accept money, vanish, and her daughter might remain untouched. Odysse, shaking but unbroken, refused, no longer playing the guest or the martyr. That same evening, as she left the room in tears, Ji-hun found her in the inner courtyard's shadow. He knelt, not with an apology, but an admission. "You were never meant to be a secret," he whispered, voice rough with a grief years in the making. "Stay, please. I know how to fight for my company, but I don't know how to fight for myself unless you're beside me." It was not love, not yet, but it was something older and stronger. The beginning of solidarity, two souls shaped by exile and expectation, drawing a thin, trembling line against the forces marshaled to destroy them. In that moment, despite the storm gathering outside and within, for the first time Odysse believed this contract might seed something far more dangerous and rare, a story neither legacy nor law could claim as their own. In the months that followed, the storm inside Zenith Innovation's palatial walls surged into a war for the future of 3 lives. The birth of Odysse's child drew closer, marked by a tension that stretched from polished boardrooms to the hushed whispers of servants behind closed doors. Odysse, now visibly pregnant, became both symbol and target, her existence leveraged by Mrs. King in a brutal legal campaign intended to erase her from the family and claim the child for the King's legacy. Lawyers and private investigators shadowed her every move, twisting the tiniest discrepancies into threats and accusations, while her daughter Ifeoma faced crueler discipline and isolation from teachers and classmates. Each attack pressed upon the edges of Odysse's resolve, and Ji-hun's transformation from a calculating heir to a man battered by love and guilt was as quiet as it was profound. He struggled openly against his mother's tactics, firing loyal staff, liquidating his private investments to ensure Odysse's safety, and finally taking the unprecedented step of denouncing his own family at a board meeting, declaring his willingness to abandon the fortune he had once been raised to inherit. The news devastated Mrs. King, but it shattered the illusion of control more thoroughly than any lawsuit or threat ever could. What his mother did next seemed unthinkable even then. Using her contacts within the legal system and allies who owed favors to her generation of chaebol elites, Mrs. Kong orchestrated an emergency custody filing that would strip Odysse of both her unborn child and her daughter, branding her an unfit mother and a criminal for actions fabricated from shadows, forged evidence of fraud, anonymous tips painting her as unstable and dangerous, past relationships twisted into threats. The plan was elegant, ruthless, and dangerously close to succeeding until, on the night before the hearing, a last desperate intervention arrived. Ji-hun, faced with the full consequences of his family's legacy, broke every silence he'd ever learned to keep. He gathered evidence of Mrs. King's machinations, recorded illicit meetings, and stood before a courtroom brimming with press, refusing to perjure himself for convenience or loyalty. When called to testify, his voice, once cold as glass, was raw, trembling with shame and resolve as he exposed the conspiracy that had shadowed Odysse for years, implicating not only his mother but former judges, police, and a web of enablers stretching back across continents. Odysse, bracing for betrayal even as she clung to hope, felt the world pause as her own daughter, wise beyond years, testified. Ifeoma's words, direct and unguarded, cut through the legal pageantry. She wanted a family where she could be herself, no matter her skin or story, and she wanted her mother safe. The child's plea, unprepared and uncoached, shifted the mood in the courtroom from calculated spectacle to something far more human. For the first time since she'd entered the Kang estate, Odyssey glimpsed a path forward not defined by contracts or threats, but by possibility. The verdict was swifter than anyone anticipated. The court ruled in favor of Odyssey, restoring custody of both her children and ordering protective measures against the Kang family. Mrs. Kang, indicted for conspiracy and obstruction, watched her world collapse, her son's eyes fixed on Odyssey, offering apology with every trembling breath. The victory, hard-won and public, came at a steep cost. Ji-hun had lost his inheritance, his father's blessing, all ties to the dynasty that had raised him. Yet standing alone outside the courthouse with Odyssey and their children, Ji-hun breathed freely for the first time, the weight of legacy at last exchanged for the fragile hope of building something new. Over the next year, the wounds of the past healed slowly, in small lived moments, moving into a modest apartment cluttered with Ife's art and the new baby's laughter. Ji-hun stumbling through lullabies sung in 3 languages, cooking Nigerian jollof rice that always came out too spicy, Odyssey laughing at her own fears as she accepted a post at a major hospital, knowing she was finally free to choose her future. In Seoul's narrow streets, among new friends and found family, they became a constellation marked by difference and resilience, never quite belonging, but always belonging to each other. Sometimes, late at night, Ji-hun would confess his regrets, the years lost to silence and pride, the people he could not save. Odyssey, holding him close, never promised that all scars would fade, but together, they honored the wounds by forging something braver, truer, and stronger than either had dared to imagine. Their story, once written by contracts and old family grudges, now belonged to no one except themselves. The story of a family built not on legacy or blood alone, but on the fierce, uncertain love that survives when all the world's expectations have been torn away. And so their lives, tangled and reborn, became not a happy ending, but something better, a hard-won beginning, where love was a choice remade each day, and the only legacy that mattered was the one they chose to create.